What is public history?
History is a way of doing history, and to make history more public. What that means is that we try to make history more accessible to publics who are not expert in the field. So that goes through different media and different mediums of communication and not only books. So public history is done through exhibitions, comics, documentary films, tour. So we try to improve the ways that the publics can reach history. So we're making history more public. We're also trying to make history more engaging in the sense that users, visitors are not passive audiences, but they take part, they interact with the objects, with the history. And it's also trying to make history more participatory, collaborative. So publics, partners take part in the production of history by bringing objects to a museum, by commenting on a website. So history is becoming more public through participation.
How does the rise of digital technology affect and impact public history?
Public history is very much connected to communication, and to make history more public, more accessible, it is inherently and deeply connected with the rise of digital technology. The rise of digital technology has allowed people to communicate, to share, to like different narratives on the web. So it has been a wonderful tool for historians to share their work, to communicate their work. But that means that historians and other practitioners have to adapt history to a new medium, which is the digital medium. So how do you communicate history through a YouTube channel, through a podcast, through a website? So we as historians have to learn better the digital tools and technology and how this changes how we do history. There's also a challenge because people can access Wikipedia, they can access many different websites, they can share their opinion about the past, and social media are full of opinions about the past, right? We discuss about yesterday, about 20 years ago, about the 19th century. And for people, it's sometimes difficult to find a good history online because there are so many voices, so many data, so many websites. So the challenge for historians and practitioners it is to occupy the public space, to be present online, and to learn how to do it. It's on all shoulders to be able to be present online and to use the digital media to communicate, but also to make history engaging and to give also some space for people to contribute to history online. And the digital tools, citizen science, forums, crowdsourcing have been very useful for public history to make, again, history more public, more accessible, and more participatory.
Why is public history training important?
I wrote this textbook first thinking about my students and my public history students, because we need to learn how to do public history. It's often not natural. It's like to be a good teacher. You can be a good researcher and be a terrible teacher because you have to learn how to teach. It's the same thing for public history. You can be a good researcher, knowing where to go to the archives, but not being able to communicate your work to a large audience. So you need to learn skills. You need to learn how to translate history. You need to know how to make history accessible. You need skills. You need a training. And this is why public history training is so important, because research methodology is always important, but it's not enough to occupy the public space, to make history accessible, to work with different partners. It is very challenging and difficult to work with different partners because you have to take them into account. You have to collaborate with different partners, different groups, different individuals. And this is something that you can learn in public history training. For example, it is important to be able to create podcasts or to be able to do historic tours. And I think that the oral skills are not enough practice and learn in public history training. So we're trying to bring new skills, new types of projects, because public history courses are, for me, very much project-based. I always ask my students to design projects at the end of the semester. So they do some historical research, but they also communicate their research to not me, but to a larger audience. And this is something that you have to learn. You have to be able to write in a very open and clear way for people who may not know about your topic. You may be able to design a website. You may be able to organize a public tour, which is something that we usually do not learn in training. So this is why this textbook, but more largely, public history training can help students to become certainly good historians, but also good communicator and good collaborator with different audience.
Can you tell us more about the second edition of the textbook? What do you think the future of the field is?
Since the last edition of the textbook in 2016, the field has deeply changed for two main reasons. First, as I said before, public history is becoming more and more international. That means more complex, more discussions, more examples. So I've tried to add examples from different parts of the world, from Japan, from Brazil, from South Africa, from France, from Italy. And this makes the field more complex, but also richer. This is something that is very important to understand because we have similar questions in different parts of the world. We may have different approaches of how to do public history, but we have similar questions about what's the role of historians, what's the role of history, who can do history today in our society. So this internationalization has greatly impacted the new edition of the textbook. Also, and as I said before, the digital technology is changing the way historians and practitioners communicate their work. Right? So it's not only about digital public history or websites. The digital technology impacts museums, collection, how you create virtual exhibition, how you do new documentary film. You have web interactive documentary thanks to digital technology. It impacts all history as well. So the rise of digital technology has had a tremendous impact on public history. And this is something that keeps changing every day. So the new edition of the textbook takes even more into consideration how the digital technology can help historians and practitioners to communicate and to share their work with different audiences. And I think the big question currently, but in the next few years, will be about how do you work with people? Because it's not only about communication, it's working with individuals, with groups, with associations, with other experts. So the question is, how do you do a good critical understanding of the past, but keep the process open to people who may not be trained in history or may not be experts in any way in the past. So finding framework in which we can share authority, and this is a big concept in public history, sharing authority with other experts. For example, historians working with museums, they have to collaborate with designers. They have to collaborate with education officers. So how do you work with different experts? How do you work with people who have witnessed the past? It is very obvious in oral history because historians interview narrators, but it's the same thing in other projects in which people can bring objects, family objects, so they take part in the process. How do you work with memories? How do you work with people who have different understanding of the past? And this is very important in some conflicting society where the past is especially controversial. It is very important in the next few years to work more on the theory of sharing authority and when you can work with, when you can't work with people because they don't want to work with you or because historians do not want to work with certain partners. So the concept of working with is perhaps what's going to lead and drive the field in the next few years.